We now want to hear about public-private partnership. And for that, we invite Suhas Wani, former director, ICRISAT Development Center. Again, 10 minutes for you.
Good morning, and thank you very much for giving this opportunity. And as indicated, I would be basically talking on how we can harness the partnerships through the consortium approach for achieving the multiple SDGs. And the topic which I will cover basically are the challenges, opportunities, and the drivers of success. As we have heard the example from dairy, now we have a more challenging job to look for the small farmers. And the number of small farm holders in the world, if you look at it, almost 90% of the farmers are small farm holders. And in a country like India, we have 137 million farm households cultivating 142 million hectares of land. And that's the challenge what we have to really handle. And in that case, if we have to harness the partnerships to address the issues or the challenges what we are facing for the agriculture, for food production or nutrition security or poverty reduction are immense. Largely because the water availability in the world has decreased almost by 70% over the last 60 years. The amount of land or the area of land degradation has dramatically increased. In most of the developing countries, 80 to 90% of arable land is basically degraded or suffering from one or another form of land degradation like nutrient depletion, hardening, salinization, and loss of biota and so on and so forth. Above that, we have the challenge of climate change or climate variability, which is basically resulting into the low production and the food insecurity, malnutrition, as well as the poverty. If we have to address these challenges, which are basically global, most of the developing world, we definitely need the innovative solutions. And if we look at the examples, particularly for the small farm holders in developing countries in Asia and Africa, most of the farmers have a wide gap between what the achievable yield is and what the current farmers are harvesting. The gap is almost 2 to 6 fold. And the challenge is how do we address this issue of minimizing this gap between what is achievable potential and what the current farmers are achieving. In that case, basically in India, we selected one particular state, that is the state of Karnataka in southern India, where total number of farmers are 7 million farmers. And then the challenge was how we are going to bridge the yield gap because the agriculture growth rate was stagnant for 8 years. In a country like India, where 56% of the farmers population are basically the farmers who are dependent for their livelihood, derive only 14% GDP benefits. And that's a challenge for avoiding the social impacts between the urban areas and the rural areas, avoid the migration, how we are going to do that. In this case, particularly this initiative, what we had taken up was a Bhu Chetna initiative taken up by International Crop Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics in partnership with Government of Karnataka to start with. However, we soon realized that if we have to really benefit the farmers and minimize the gap of the yields, what is achievable and what farmers are harvesting, then you have to forego the compartmental approach which has been adopted worldwide. Most of the developing countries, we adopt the compartmental approach of a cultivar, a fertilizer management, the pest management, the marketing issues, the collective action, and so on and so forth. So in this case, basically the interventions have to be holistic, and we use the entry point activity basically as a soil health mapping. Unfortunately, the science of soil analysis is known more than 100 years ago. But most of the places, if you ask the farmers, how is your soil health, they are not aware of that. They know only what is to be added is nitrogen, phosphorus and potash. And they are not aware that there are other 13 nutrients which are also required for the plant to grow. And in that case, we use this at direct entry point as a soil health analysis. And you can imagine you have to come up with developing a method for representative soil sampling so that you can advise the farmers, because you cannot analyze 7 million samples in a given time period. And in that case, basically, we started with analyzing the samples, collecting the information and converting it into the simple form for the farmers to adopt. Then the knowledge delivery system had to be developed because 7 million farmers need to be made aware. Another challenge was the policy makers and the bureaucracy. You have to bring them on board to see that this is the issue which need to be addressed, which results into policies and institutional arrangements. And following that, then you have to ensure that what you are prescribing is available for the farmers to adopt. The fertilizers have to be available in the villages, and for that you need to bring in the public-private partnerships, and that's where the challenge comes. Then the next challenge basically comes then when you have produced, the prices of the market will come down, and that should not happen so that farmers don't get the benefit of increased productivity. And to avoid that, basically you have to bring in again the people, private companies who are going to take up the product. By adopting this integrated approach, starting with soil health mapping, bringing the watershed management, the pest management, the intercropping, the distribution of improved seeds, fertilizers, promotion of high-yielding varieties, and demand-driven model was developed. By this way, in 5 years, we could reach almost 5 million farmers. The total benefit what was come up in terms of the economic benefits for the farmers and the government of Karnataka was almost $453 million in 7 years period as such. And the individual farmers got increased yields anywhere from 20% up to 65%, and the on an average benefit was about $500 per season for the farmers. With this sort of approach, then we realized that we have another big area of rice fallows in India. About 6 million hectare areas are fallowed after growing the rice. There is enough soil moisture, but there is no cultivation, mainly because of the improper use of technologies and the social engineering required, because there is a common practice of releasing the animals after harvest of the rice crop. And in that case, Government of India has taken up a mission mode project, which you will hear more in detail into the FSF side events. And following the consortium approach of the government organizations, the agricultural universities, the Krishi Vigyan Kendras, and also the support mechanism for purchasing the product, the Government of India could cover 1.9 million hectare. And as you will be glad to know that the country which was importing 5 million tons of pulses for a year back now is self-sufficient in the pulses requirement of the country. So the drivers of success in this sort of consortium approach or the big projects is basically we have to come up with a demand-driven intervention rather than the supply-driven intervention for the farmers. It has to be holistic and integrated market-oriented solutions. We need to ensure that every consortium partners get the tangible benefits out of the involvement in that. Equal partnerships, trust building and shared vision among the consortium partners is very much required. The good leadership for the consortium is very much required, because most of the time, rather than we have to consider we and share the credit with the other consortium partners. Predisposition to work collectively, because most of the institutes, most of the partners would like to work in their own area of expertise, and they don't look at the holistic picture as such. And that's what basically the change of mindset of all the actors is very, very critical in this case. We need to ensure the transparency and social vigilance so that the community has a trust in the team which is delivering the product on the ground, and that's where basically important is empowerment of the stakeholders. The farmers need to be empowered so that they can get their benefits, and also the consortium partners need to be empowered to deliver what is required for the benefit of the farmers. So the approach what we really need is basically it should be the community driven, inclusive, public-private partnership consortium has to be there. Convergence has to brought it in so that we don't rediscover the things again. And of course, it's a participatory thing as such. The approach to interventions, basically, as we have discussed, it should be holistic. It should be totally backed with the science and sustainable, inclusive, valued, but not free inputs to the farmers as such, and it should be market-driven approach as such. We need to really bring in all the things together, the production side, the marketing side, the processing side, and the post-harvest losses side together. And at a time, you have to really fire the multiple growth engines if we need to achieve the sustainable development. And each wheel which is rotating has to rotate in synchrony with the other one. And that's the toughest job in the consortium, always to get the people to work together. And that's where the challenge really lies in this one. Thank you very much.